Adaptation is so often a tricky business.
On May the
Whether it's
19th,
films,
2022, a video called The Lord of the Rings Video Game Retrospective, an exhaustive history and review, was released by the channel I Finished a Video Game. The video is a 5-hour epic, even longer than the extended edition of The Return of the King, and analyzes every video game ever released related to the works of Tolkien, and the history of the Lord of the Rings video game franchise as a whole. Well, I say every video game, but that's not quite true. From watching the video, it is clear the person behind this channel has played, and maybe even completed, every single video game he is analyzing in the video. That's more than 20 video games. However, this rigor forced him to exclude one particular video game, one that to me is the most important of all. A few minutes into the video, the following statement is made.
Finally, and rather importantly, this retrospective won't be covering The Lord of the Rings Online. While it's a huge part of the Lord of the Rings video game lineage, the simple fact is that it's an enormous MMO which I'm just simply not able to cover effectively or fairly. The game currently spans 9 paid expansions and a host of large free patches, which are spread over thousands and thousands of hours of content. As someone who would be starting completely fresh with zero experience, I don't really feel like I'd be able to analyse its importance or merits with the time available to me. Due to that, I'll be excluding it from this retrospective and leaving it up to those with more experience with the game to write its place in history.
Well, sir, I will try. First, it might be good to explain who I am. I am Burning Embers, and I have so far mainly made videos about many of the book references the developers have put into the video game The Lord of the Rings Online. The more thorough of you will have noticed I have not yet been doing this for a long time, so why do I feel like I have the credentials to reply to the Lord of the Rings retrospective? It is because I have played The Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO, for a very long time. 11 years in fact, and I am also very familiar with many of the video games present in the retrospective, and I am also really familiar with the source material, having read most of the books more than once, which helps with assessing the story. While I am definitely not a raider, and endgame content is not really what I am most experienced in, I have reached endgame many times and have occasionally done some raids. The biggest reason I want to make this video though, is because I believe many of the wishes of IFAVG when it comes to the Lord of the Rings franchise have been realized in LOTRO, and I think it deserves a spot in the canon of Lord of the Rings video games. First, let's give a bit of exposition to the history of the Lord of the Rings Online. The oldest announcement for what would become the Lord of the Rings Online came way back in 1998, when the studio called Sierra Online Incorporated acquired the necessary rights to create a multi-massive online game set in Middle-earth. This is the same studio that would later create The Hobbit, the 3D platformer in the retrospective, but ultimately the studio would never produce the MMO. The studio landed into financial troubles and eventually the parent company Vivendi, the company often mentioned in the beginning of the retrospective, made a partnership with Turbine to develop the game. The name was changed from Middle-earth Online to Lord of the Rings Online and released in 2007. The game would go free to play in 2010, although how fair that system was is a whole other discussion. The game received several expansions and updates, which I will go into later. These days it is run by a studio called Standing Stone Games, and it is published by Daybreak Game Company. During this time, the game went through many stadia. It was originally intended as a 2D isometric game like Ultima Online and set in the 4th Age, after the events of the Lord of the Rings books. Then it was switched to a 3D isometric, and then management at Vivendi decided it had to be an EverQuest clone. The project was eventually taken out of Sierra's hands and sent to Turbine, who developed it into the MMO we know today, with a striking similarity to the genre codified by the World of Warcraft 3 years earlier. So let's have a look at the game Turbine created. Like you might have guessed from my previous statement, LOTRO is not necessarily the most original game in terms of gameplay. It has often been called a WoW clone, and people who are familiar with that game will definitely see much of the same bones. It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG, with tap-targeting combat, and a large amount of skill bars for the player to fill up with the skills they acquire while leveling up. The core loop consists of filling your quest log with tasks from the NPCs in the world, completing those tasks, and backtracking to the NPC to collect your reward, which can range from gear to consumables to cosmetics. You have a minimap, a health and mana bar, although they call it something different, a chat, and many other panels for your equipment, crafting, and others. There are 7 races and 11 classes to choose from, which range from standard melee, magic or ranged classes to more original classes like the combo-reliant Warden or the shape-shifting Bjorning. It is a classic MMO in every sense, and if you want a more complete impression of the combat and mechanics, I would suggest watching this video by Josh Strive Hayes for a new player's perspective, or videos by Louis7, who creates quality guides on how to play Lord of the Rings online. Beyond the combat, LOTRO is a very immersive MMO with many role-playing options. During the character creation, you can choose which part of the world your character hails from, and you will even get suggestions for lore-accurate names for your character. When you find a notary, you can even add a surname and adopt other players, which grants titles that you can add to your player name, visible to other players. There's a biography panel where you can write your own background story, and a cosmetics panel where you can cosmetically equip items, dye to your own tastes to create your own personal outfit. Completing achievements called deeds in the game will give you titles to add to your character's name, and your rank in PvP will be added as a prefix. These systems give you a lot of control in creating your own personal character. A lot of systems in the game are named in lore-accurate ways. Health is called morale in-game, which means the character does not die when their morale runs out, they simply lose the will to fight. And guilds and parties are called kinships and fellowships. Regarding the role-playing options, there are many tasks and items which serve no other function but to immerse and entertain. Player housing has been a part of the game for a long time, with several neighborhoods in the world, all with a different theme. Want to buy your own hobbit hole? You can. Want to live in a dwarf home in the mountains of Erebor? You can. You want a Rohirric long hall as a guild house? You also can. You can fill these houses up with items you get from story and reputation quests. There is also a fishing system which gives no other advantages but completing some achievements and granting cosmetics to put into your house. And you can also craft many different useful items like food or gear, but you could also craft pipeweed, which has no other function but a cosmetic smoking animation which changes the smoke shape with each type of pipeweed that you make. But the most insane role-playing system present in the game is the music system. There are 13 different instruments in the game which can be controlled with the 1 through equals keys. This in itself is not revolutionary, but the game has built-in compatibility with .abc files, a system which uses ASCII signs as music notation. You can play music automatically from these files, allowing you to write your own music and play it back in-game or play existing songs. You can even sync this action up with other players in your fellowship to play as a band. There are even full-fledged festivals in LOTRO, with the most famous one being Weatherstock, held annually on Weathertop, where players perform their own music. This is as far as I would like to cover the gameplay systems themselves, as the most interesting aspect of this game is what it does with its setting and story. To close this part off, I would like to say that I've always experienced LOTRO as a solid enough MMO, incredibly immersive, and while a hardcore raider will likely enjoy World of Warcraft much more, LOTRO can deliver satisfying combat challenges depending on which raids you are playing. Now let's have a look at the world the Lord of the Rings Online created. The game is set in 3rd Age Middle-earth, as the developers of the game only have the rights to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books, which unfortunately means the characters and events from the Silmarillion are all off limits. When the game released as the Lord of the Rings Online Shadows of Angmar, only the region of Eriador was playable. This included Breland, Ered Luin or the Blue Mountains, the Shire, the Lonelands, the North Downs, the Trollshaws, the Misty Mountains, and the Etten Moors, which was a PvP zone, and Angmar. These regions would take you up to level 50, and when compared to all other games mentioned in the retrospective, it's already the biggest amount of landmass to explore. This landmass was expanded with Vorogel, Eregion and Evendim by the time the first expansion rolled around. Each expansion of the game increased the playable landmass greatly. The first expansion, the Mines of Moria, added Moria itself, which was divided into 10 different areas, and the region of Lothlorien. The second expansion, the Siege of Mirkwood, added southern Mirkwood, and a subsequent update added the region of Enedwaith. The Rise of Isengard expansion added Dunland, the Gap of Rohan and Nan-Kurunir, which includes Isengard itself. The Riders of Rohan added East Rohan, and Helm's Deep added West Rohan. Mordor added Mordor, and Minas Morgul added Minas Morgul. The last two expansions, the War of the Three Peaks and the Fate of Gundabad, added extra dwarven regions in northern Rovanion. This is not all, however, as between expansions, updates also brought extra content. These updates added all of Gondor, all regions in Rovanion from The Hobbit like Erebor and northern Mirkwood, and many of the dwarven homelands. The updates also closed many gaps between other maps, and these days you can walk basically the entire road Bilbo took, as the addition of the Vales of the Anduin connected Rovanion with the Misty Mountains. The same goes for the passage the most recent expansion Fate of Gundabad provides to Angmar, the final region of the first ever content set of the game. This means, provided you can handle the enemies in the maps, you can travel almost anywhere you want. Want to visit the beacons in Gondor, or travel to Gollum's Cave in the Misty Mountains? You can. Want to know where that skeleton Pippin dropped into the well in Moria ended up? Sure, here it is. The best thing about all this is that the newer regions are also some of the best looking ones. The developers' blades have not grown dull. If anything, they have become better at adapting regions from the books as they have gone on, and they do not show any signs of stopping at the moment. However, all these square kilometers of land mean nothing if there is no detail. Luckily, the developers' attention to detail is impeccable. I hope you will forgive me for doing a small plug for the videos on my channel, but for the past few months I have been making videos showcasing all the book details present in the maps. Please check them out if you are interested. For the purposes of this video, I will give you some examples later of the level of detail in these maps. First, I would like to share with you how I discovered all these details, and how the game hooked me 11 years ago when I was a 13-year-old Dutch teenager with a basic grasp of the English language. When I was young, my parents bought me and my brothers a PlayStation 2 with a copy of The Two Towers by EA, the same game featured in the retrospective. This was my first contact with The Lord of the Rings, and I was hooked quite quickly after watching the movies. I started looking for other video games related to The Lord of the Rings, and at some point came across LOTRO as it became free to play. I actually started playing before I was able to read the books, as we did not own copies in Dutch and the English text was a little bit too difficult just yet. This means I started playing LOTRO before I actually read any of Tolkien's writings. My grandmother gave me the first book in Dutch for Christmas and I started reading it. When I played the game, I would notice that any time I read a chapter, I could find details from that chapter in the game. Most of the locations and many of the NPCs I did not recognize while playing started making more sense when I read the books, and I will now give you some examples. After Frodo crosses the Brandywine River on the Buckleberry Ferry after being chased by a Nazgul, he travels towards the town of Bree. This happens instantly in the films, but in the books the hobbits travel through a tunnel in the hedge at Buckland and travel through the Old Forest. While the Old Forest, and yes, also Tom Bombadil, are present in the game, you usually enter it from the northern side and not from the western side. If you do take the time to travel to the western side, you will find the tunnel the hobbits used, even if the game's story does not really require you to use it. Later, when the hobbits reach Weathertop with Strider, they find a stash of firewood left by other rangers and a spring of water. This wood stash and spring are also present in a small corner near the stable master. Or you could go to Goblin Town in the Misty Mountains and visit Gollum's cave and find Gollum's boat moored on the side of the shore of his underground lake, because Gollum is obviously not at home. He is stalking the Fellowship through Eregil. You can also find the broken part of the Bridge of Khazad-dûm at the bottom of Moria, together with Gandalf's burnt hat. You could also see animal eyes glow in the dark in northern Mirkwood, just like Bilbo did when he went through the forest with Thorin's company, and even the constellations in the night sky are derived from the notes of Tolkien. This just goes on, and pretty much anything you've read in the books will be adapted into the game. As a fan, the amount of detail really is dumbfounding, and most of these details are not even quest objectives, they are just there for you to find if you bother to look for them. Another highly featured aspect of the video games in the retrospective is their story. Many games are simply copies of the story from the books or the Peter Jackson movies adapted to fit to the gameplay. There are of course some notable exceptions like Shadow of Mordor, The Third Age, The War in the North and Battle for Middle-earth 2, but the majority of the games reviewed follow the story of the Fellowship of the Ring as they travel towards Mordor. At the end of the retrospective, IFAVG meditates on how close Lord of the Rings video games should adhere to the existing canon, or whether the world should just be used as a backdrop for new stories. I think The Lord of the Rings Online provides quite a unique example. It is a video game which dogmatically adheres to the material it is based on, as far as that's possible due to the licensing rights. However, it still manages to tell interesting and new stories which generally fit with the existing canon. Now, a fair warning, we will be getting into spoiler territory here for a lot of the storylines in LOTRO. If you do not want to be spoiled, you can skip to this timestamp in the video. The story of The Lord of the Rings Online is divided into volumes, which contain about 10 to 15 books, which themselves contain about 10 to 15 quests. At the time of writing, 6 volumes have been released. The Shadows of Angmar, The Mines of Moria, The Allies of the King, The Strength of Sauron, The Black Book of Mordor, and as last, The Legacy of Durin and The Trials of the Dwarves. These volumes can span multiple expansions and can be seen as a single story arc. All of these volumes combined contain between 600 or 1350, often quite lengthy quests. I will not be able to cover everything that happens in there, as this is 15 years of content after all. I will just give you a broad overview so you have an idea of how the stories feel and how they fit with the source material. The first volume, The Shadows of Angmar, plays out at around the same time as the Lord of the Rings story and only occasionally intersects with it. Most of the time you are just behind or just ahead of the Fellowship. First volume story shares some of its aspects with games like War in the North or Battle for Middle-earth 2. During the War of the Ring, not just Gondor and Rohan, but all peoples all over Middle-earth experience conflict. The premise of Shadows of Angmar is that a dark power has returned to the old kingdom of Angmar in the north and threatens Eriador, the northwestern part of Middle-earth. You begin as a sort of nobody in your respective starting area, which can be the Shire, Ered Luin, or Breland. After proving yourself skilled and helpful in your starter region, you will go through Breland, where you aid Aragorn in his search for Frodo and the Hobbits. While you are following the Hobbits' tracks through the Old Forest, they find Aragorn in Bree and leave for Rivendell. During your stint in Breland, you discover the Witch King is building an army once again in Angmar, and explain this to Gandalf, who you find at the Prancing Pony after Aragorn has left. Gandalf is worried about this and explains that during his escape from the Tower of Orthanc, Gwaihir the Eagle told him of a dangerous corruption in the Lone Lands. which is the area of land surrounding Weathertop, where Aragorn and the hobbits are currently traveling through. In this region you help the wizard Radagast the Brown with defeating a corrupted river spirit. Lore buffs will know that Radagast traveled to the north with a message for Gandalf from Saruman, which in the books is the reason why Gandalf is lured to Orthanc in the first place. During this exchange, however, Gandalf asks Radagast to aid against the powers of evil wherever he can. Therefore, the presence of Radagast in the Lone Lands has some precedence in the books. After aiding in the Lone Lands, you are asked to go to the North Downs, where the headquarters of the Dunedain are located in the town of Esteldin. You aid the leader of the Rangers, Halbarad, who is taking the lead while Aragorn is on his quest, with keeping the region around Esteldin safe. After this, you travel to Rivendell to deliver news of your deeds to Aragorn, after which you are asked to scout the region around Rivendell for the Black Riders who were washed away in the flood of the river Bruinen. You follow the path of the Ringwraith you encounter through to the Misty Mountains and all the way to Angmar. There you temporarily defeat the current steward of Angmar, Morderith. However, during this fight, the Palantir Morderith had in his possession, which he presumably retrieved from the Bay of Vorogel, where it lay on the bottom of the ice-cold water, was stolen by a mysterious old lady named Sarah Oakheart. While following this lady, she casts off her disguise, and you discover her to be a servant of Mordor called Amarthiel, who possesses the body of an elven maiden called Narmeleth as a vessel. The rest of the story revolves around discovering the history of Narmeleth and preventing Amarthiel from becoming the new ruler of Angmar. You discover Narmeleth was once an elf of Eregion and was beguiled by Sauron in disguise to learn how to create rings of power during the Second Age when Sauron dwelt in Eregion as Anatar the Gift Lord. Amarthiel is trying to fight her old lesser ring of power, Narghuil. After the player finds the ring broken in two, Amarthiel lures you to the ring forges of Eregion and steals the ring parts from you. Using Narmeleth's knowledge, she tries to repair the ring. And though the player and Narmeleth's father Laerdan try to stop her, she succeeds. Just before Amarthiel is ready to claim the throne of Angmar, Morderith returns and slays her father. The grief of Narmeleth over losing her father and the loss of the chance of becoming the ruler of Angmar breaks Amarthiel's grip over the elf maiden, and she returns to her former self. Together you manage in the end to slay Morderith, seemingly for good, but not before he inflicts a mortal wound on Narmeleth, who perishes. While I covered it quite quickly, the story of Amarthiel is one of the best written ones in-game. Taking place over several books of the first volume, you really get a sense of the tragedy that has befallen her. Additionally, right before he is slain, Laerdan reveals the true identity of Morderith. His name of old was Eärnur, a canon character who was the last king of Gondor and disappeared when he rode to Minas Morgul to accept a challenge from the Witch King to a personal duel. The next volume starts with the departure of the Fellowship of the Ring from Rivendell. You have completed your hunt in Angmar during the 2-month stay they enjoy in Rivendell, and after the Fellowship has left you join an expedition called the Iron Garrison, who are attempting to visit Balin's expedition and help him reclaim Moria. During this expedition you help the dwarves gain a foothold in Moria, which you reach after the Fellowship has passed through it. The effects of their passage are clear. The mines are filled with orcs, the Balrog lies dead on the peak of Siraxigil, and many passages like the Durin's Way from the tomb of Balin and the bridge of Khazad-dûm are broken. After learning of the defeat of Balin's expedition and the finding of the axe of Durin himself, the Iron Garrison has several battles with the orcs inside Moria. Eventually you discover an emissary from Dol Guldur, Sauron's fortress of old in southern Mirkwood, is raising evil spirits deep below the mines. The dwarves ask for aid from the elves of Lothlorien, which they reluctantly give. The player character captures the leader of the orcs of Moria responsible for Balin's death, named Mazoch, and escort him to Lothlorien. There you reunite with the Fellowship as they rest in Lothlorien, and you are asked to help out with an attack on Dol Guldur in southern Mirkwood. You travel in secret through Mirkwood while guarding Mazoch with a company of elves, as you intend to exchange him for dwarven prisoners and the mithril axe of Durin, which was taken from you in Moria. While the exchange ultimately fails, a surprise attack is launched on the fortress by taking the secret passage Gandalf used to search for Thorin Oakenshield's father, Thrain. This attack is successful and you drive the Witch King from his fortress. While this volume covers a lot less ground, LOTRO's version of Moria is truly a sight to behold. Eventually, the Iron Garrison does decide to retreat from Moria, as according to the books, it is truly recaptured somewhere in the 4th Age by a dwarf called Durin the 7th. Now we come to one of my favorite volumes. You are summoned by Elrond and travel to Rivendell, and are asked to join a group of rangers called the Grey Company who are riding south to join their chieftain Aragorn in war. Book readers may remember this group as they find Aragorn after he visited the fallen Isengard together with Theoden. They bring him a furled kingly standard, which is a gift from Arwen, and they bring him Elrond's advice to take the paths of the dead. You gather this company of rangers together as you have met most of them during your travels in Eriador. You visit them all and ask them to join the company, which most of them do. You ride towards the south, where you eventually reach Dunland, which is under the influence of the White Hand of Saruman. You spend quite a while aiding the Falcon clan, a group of Dunlandings who are rebelling against Saruman, and you aid them with attacking other Dunlanding settlements and gathering supplies. Ultimately, they betray you and sell you out to Saruman, as he had promised to give them the land the Rohirrim once took from them back. You spend your time in the pits of Isengard doing menial tasks for your oppressive overseers, and eventually you manage to escape. After recapturing some of your allies from the Dunlandings, you part ways with the Grey Company and stay with Prince Theodred of Rohan as he attempts to defend the Ford of the Isen from the White Hand forces. We know, of course, from the films and the books that this ends with the death of Theodred, and after the battle he is buried at the ford according to his last wishes, the same as it was in the books. You, as the player character, experience troubling dreams after this battle and travel to Lothlorien to seek counsel from Galadriel. There you meet Gandalf the White, who has returned from the Beyond to aid the peoples of Middle-earth once more. After explaining your dreams, you are told to track the Fellowship along the great river Anduin, as they seem to be in danger. While following this track, you come across the corpse of a fell beast, a flying mount of a Nazgul, which Legolas had shot down from the sky while they were traveling on the river at night in the books. You encounter the Nazgul itself, and after driving it off, you are tasked with following the path of the Fellowship along the river. You visit Amon Hen, the location of Boromir's death, and learn of the breaking of the Fellowship. After this, you travel towards Rohan and learn of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli's pursuit of the Uruk-hai, and you decide to follow their trail instead of the one of the hobbits. You ultimately find Éomer, and after learning of the destruction of the Uruk-hai, you travel with him to Edoras, where Éomer is banished after he insults Grima Wormtongue. You are banished as well, and spend some time in the other regions of Rohan, where you try to hinder the White Hand as much as you can. The signs of war upon the land are so heavy that you decide, banished or not, that the king must be informed. You time your visit well, as you enter the Golden Hall while Gandalf relieves the king of his influence from Grima Wormtongue and Saruman, and he lifts your banishment. During the rest of this volume, you help with the war preparations and rout traitors throughout the whole of Rohan, and ultimately you join the fight at Helm's Deep, where you aid in the defeat of Saruman. After visiting an overthrown Isengard, where you also find one of your companions of the Grey Company you had to leave behind during your own escape, the volume ends. The next volume adheres quite closely to the journey of Aragorn as he tries to reach Minas Tirith. You join him and the Grey Company in their travels through the Pass of the Dead, where you witness Aragorn recruit the army of the dead at the Stone of Erech, where they were once cursed by Isildur. You journey through southern Gondor, past Dol Amroth and towards the Umbar ships moored at Pelargir. This fleet you help overtake with the aid of the army of the dead, after which they are released from their curse by Aragorn. The ships are filled with soldiers gathered in southern Gondor, and they prepare themselves for battle. You, in the meanwhile, travel to southern Ithilien, where you meet up with Faramir in Osgiliath. You find the city nearly fallen and you retreat to Minas Tirith, where you will aid in the siege of the city. During your time in Osgiliath and in Minas Tirith, you encounter Gothmog, a reincarnated Mordorith who serves as the commander of the armies of the Pelennor Fields, together with the Witch King. Gandalf asks you in Minas Tirith to ride out in search of the Riders of Rohan, without whose aid the battle will for sure be lost. You leave the city before the full attack begins and join the Riders of Rohan as they pass through the woods of the Druadan, the woodmen who show the Rohirrim a safe route towards Minas Tirith on an old mountain path. With the Rohirrim you aid in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields and help defeat the host of Mordor. In this battle, many of the characters you met during your adventures will die, as quite a few rangers from the Grey Company who you traveled with will perish, including Halbarad, who is specifically mentioned in the books. After this loss you march with the King Elessar, after witnessing him heal victims of the Witch King's Black Breath, towards the Black Gate. You march through Ithilien, sounding the challenge to any forces of evil who will hear. During this march, a few of the men who fear the battle with Mordor are allowed to split and clear out the river island of Caer Andros of any remaining forces. This is also described in the books, and the player character can help these soldiers out for a short while. This volume ends with the battle at the Black Gate and the destruction of the One Ring, thus ending Sauron's reign on Middle-earth. After you witness the Fellowship regrouping at the Fields of Cormallen and the coronation and wedding of Aragorn, the volume ends, and the story of the ring comes to an end as well. We are not done, however, as the Fourth Age has now begun, and many exciting works are yet to be finished. Though the great enemy of the Free Peoples has been defeated, there are still many forces of evil nested in the land of Mordor. Though we know from the books that the land of Mordor will eventually be given to the defeated enemies of Gondor by King Elessar, the player character will help make sure no more evil may come out of that land. After entering Mordor and exploring the dungeons of its many fortresses, the mouth of Sauron comes to treat with the newly crowned King Elessar. He acknowledges Aragorn's authority and asks to become his subject if he is allowed to rule what is left of Mordor. His terms are rejected, and a freed Easterling commander reveals to you a group of powerful servants called the Gurzul, or the Deathless, may still unite the forces of Mordor. While spying on a secret meeting of the Gurzul, the player witnesses Lareth the Stained, a poisoner who was responsible for a great plague that nearly wiped out the northern kingdom of Arnor in the Second Age, assume control and kill the mouth of Sauron, in-game called Dulgabeth. One of the Gurzul was missing from this meeting, Karasgar, the Weeping Warrior, who is rumored to be searching for an artifact in Dol Guldur. The player is sent to Dol Guldur to investigate, and after you come back empty-handed, Galadriel brings down the fortress, as is described in the appendices of the Return of the King. From here you are invited by King Thranduil of Mirkwood to join him at his hall in Felagoth, and from there you travel to a rebuilt lake town and Erebor in search of Karasgar. You reach the Lonely Mountain and search through it, but you end up with nothing, and you are sent to the Iron Hills to collect the son of the king under the mountain and bring him back to Erebor now that the War of the Ring is over. In the Iron Mountains, you find a secret room where a black book with Sauron's eye on the cover is found. This book is given to Gandalf to study, and meanwhile the player is once again sent after the king's son, named Durin the Seventh, because he has left Erebor in the meanwhile with a band of dwarves to reclaim the old dwarf holds in the Grey Mountains. Here the player runs into Karasgar, who has made dominion over a frost wraith, killing many dwarves in an attempt to force them to leave. During the final confrontation in the dwarf homes, Karasgar is beaten by Gandalf, but not before Karasgar notices the book Gandalf is holding. Due to Karasgar's desire for the book, Gandalf doubles his attempts to decipher it and brings it to Beorn's house in the Vales of the Anduin, where he may study it safely. You also find Elrond and his household there as they are on their way to the wedding of Arwen and Aragorn. While you are there, Gandalf sends you to the Gladden Fields, where the woodmen report a shade has been seen wandering around the fields the race of hobbits once called home. After finding the shade, Elrond recognizes him to be none other than King Isildur, who was slain at this spot by orc arrows. You relive Isildur's memories by playing through a small area of Mordor as it was during the Second Age, during the Siege of Barad-dûr and just before the Battle of the Last Alliance. From here, Isildur tells the player he has visions of a dark tower, and Gandalf surmises this is Minas Morgul, and he thinks Isildur's remains may have been brought there by the dark powers while they were searching for the ring in the Gladden Fields. The player enters the city with the help from Faramir's rangers, and you fight your way through the rings of the city, filled with ghosts and monsters. Meanwhile, it is also being attacked by the Gurzyul, who want to overthrow Gothmog, who is currently settled in Minas Morgul. With the mask Gandalf took from Karasgar back in the Grey Mountains, the player enters the upper chambers of Minas Morgul and confronts Gothmog. By reminding him of its defeats as Eärnur and Mordorith, the player character overpowers Gothmog, and he dies in a duel with the Gurzyul Ugrugor just after he manages to slay his opponent. A casket filled with the dust of Isildur's bones is brought to Rivendell, completing his old oath of delivering the ring of the enemy and himself to Elrond's last homely house. And so Isildur finally departs from the world of the living. In the epilogue, the content of the Black Book of Mordor is finally revealed by Gandalf. It turns out not to be a dark artifact, but a tale written down by a dwarf called Voin, who once was a friend to King Eärnur of Gondor. When Eärnur disappeared at Minas Morgul, Voin left his wife and children to search for his old friend. He entered Mordor as a slave and labored in the Dark Land for years until he managed to get himself to the city where he reunites with Eärnur, who is bound there by a spell from the Witch King. After comforting Eärnur during his years of torture, Voin escapes the city when he sees his old friend be erased and rewrought into the wraith Mordorith. Once back home, he wrote an account of the life of the last king of Gondor, so he would never be forgotten. And this book he hid in a secret chamber in his house, where the player character would find it ages later. I played this story literally a decade after I first battled with Mordorith back into the Shadows of Angmar, and to see the tragic downfall of the character that would later become your own mortal enemy truthfully brought tears to my eyes. This arc really shows the power of running a storyline over literal years. Such a throwback can be incredibly powerful. This last volume I had not actually finished myself when I started making this video, so I went ahead and completed the story, so I can now tell you all of it. This story begins with the character we left halfway through the previous volume, Durin the Seventh. Back in the Grey Mountains, the multiple clans of dwarves who managed to recapture their homes of old grow increasingly frustrated with each other. While trying to ease this frustration, Durin disappears and is found near an ice sheet called the Anvil of Winterstith. After recovering from the trance you found him in, Durin explains to you he heard a voice coming from the ice, and it spoke to him of dwarves long dead and the great deeds they accomplished. This inspired him to attempt to reclaim the lost dwarven city of Gundabad, where Durin the Deathless, the first of the dwarves and the father of the Longbeard clan, once awoke before he established the realm of Moria. The player is sent towards Gundabad to measure the orcish presence in the region, and after surviving an assault on a local village of men, you learn from one of the slain enemies that a new leader is rising in Gundabad, Gorgar the Ruthless, and he is preparing for war. This convinces the dwarves to prepare, and with an army combined of several dwarf clans you march towards Gundabad and fight in a war against the orcs. After the orcs retreat inside Gundabad and the entrance is closed by Rimil Frostheart, a frost dragon, the dwarves emerge victorious and regroup before the gate of Gundabad. Their army is magnified by the addition of what is left of the Iron Garrison, who you helped in their attempt to reclaim Moria, and dwarves who were freed from Mordor. You break through the ice and enter Gundabad. Just before this moment, you can also play an interlude chapter where you experience the Battle of Azanul Bizar, where Thorin gets his nickname Oakenshield, and where many dwarves die in their attempt to fight their way into Moria. Here you see all the dwarf clans together for the first time, and the event proceeds very closely to the way they are described in the appendices of the Return of the King. After this interlude, you fight your way into Gundabad, dealing with orcs, creatures and evil men from Angmar who entered the mountain from the north. Eventually you capture a goblin who was high in the ranks of Gorgar, and he tells you the story of how he tried to escape from Gundabad, only to run into the dragon Hrimil Frostheart, who explains it was her who convinced Durin the Seventh into this assault by speaking to him through the ice. From the captured goblin you also learn Gorgar bears a mithril hammer, which he is forbidden to bring with him when he speaks with the Frost Drake. This prompts Durin to try and steal this hammer, for it is clearly an item the dragon fears. After the successful theft, the goblin is safely released as thanks for his help. With the hammer in hand you travel to the room where the goblins originally found it, and after a dwarf completes a mosaic present in the chamber, a secret passage is revealed deeper into the mountain. In this chamber deep below the mountain, a tomb belonging to the dwarf Motsok was found, a rebellious dwarf who challenged Durin the Deathless in the first days of the dwarves. Motsok lives still and greets Durin like an old friend. Durin does not understand what's going on, and Motsok shows you and Durin the Seventh visions of all the deaths of all the Durins that went before him. And he also shows you the origin of his rebellion against Durin the Deathless. From this story you learn that the mithril hammer was used long ago to drive off the dragons of Sauron who attacked Gundabad, and one of those dragons was Hrimil, who was injured by the hammer. The memories of all his forefathers are awakened in Durin, and he turns out to really actually be the seventh reincarnation of the first dwarf to ever live. From his regained memories he finishes the tale that Motsok began. He reveals that during a war they fought with the orcs, Motsok and his people repented and helped the other dwarves defeat the armies of evil. After this war, Motsok was spared by Durin and lived out his years as a hermit in the chamber you find yourselves in. After his death, the Valar Aule, although he is called the first crafter in the game because of rights issues, gives him the dreaming sight, which enables him to watch in a long-lasting dream all the events of the world unfold. It was not the Frost Drake who spoke to Durin through the ice, but Motsok, and he gave Durin the thought of reclaiming his birthright, and for this service he may finally lay at peace soon. However, Motsok decides to walk the earth for one more day and wants to help Durin conquer Gundabad. Durin calls for a meeting between all dwarf leaders, and just after he declares Gundabad is not solely the property of his own clan, the Longbeards, but to all dwarves, Hrimil interrupts the meeting, but flees for Motsok and the mithril hammer. At the peak of Gundabad you wound Hrimil, and you can defeat the dragon in a separate raid if you wish. With its wounding, however, Gundabad is officially reclaimed for the dwarves. With his time come to an end, Motsok finally departs from the world. In the epilogue, Durin muses over the thought of reclaiming Moria as well, though he puts it aside from the moment. From the appendices of the Return of the King, we know he will eventually conquer the Dwarven Kingdom for good. So this concludes the story of LOTRO as far as it goes for now. I hope I've been able to convey how well this has been integrated into the existing lore written by Tolkien, and how the developers managed to tell compelling original stories within its framework. I have omitted many interesting characters you meet and travel with in the game, as it would simply be too much information. The last I can say on this matter is that LOTRO is often seen as a game where the journey is more important than the destination. Traveling the world and experiencing this story is where the game truly shines, even though there is still some fun in the endgame to be found. So there we are. This game was released shortly after the Battle for Middle-earth 2 in the original retrospective timeline, and has remained quietly running in the background of the Lord of the Rings gaming franchise ever since. A giant game like an MMO has the time and space to adapt all of Tolkien's writings and set the stage for compelling long-term stories. Its world is huge and incredibly detailed, just as Tolkien wrote it, and exploring it can easily take years. Personally, I feel no work of fiction has come closer to adapting Tolkien's world as well as LOTRO has. It stays true to the themes and events of the books, while creating new stories and characters worth exploring. Where Peter Jackson's films were a bombastic tour de force of filmmaking, where a complex story was skillfully told in a time span of about 9 hours, The Lord of the Rings Online is more of a slow burn. It takes hours or days of gameplay to take a step the films and other games may take in a matter of minutes. While the story told in The Lord of the Rings in the books themselves is impressive, what makes it unique is the world crafted around it. The feeling of being lost in an alternate reality. That is what LOTRO captures very well, in my opinion. Not a single story, but a world. The Tolkien dogmatism is what makes LOTRO so special for fans of the books to play through, and I feel that that is also the reason it has managed to keep going for as long as it has. Together, of course, with the passion and determination shown by the developers. So, should all games follow this example and remain 100% true to Tolkien's words? I do not think so. If you look closely, you will see that even LOTRO had to create some story beats which are quite dubious in their canonicity. I think a character as powerful as the player character would have been mentioned by Tolkien. Or a previous life of Gandalf, for instance, like during the Second Age, where in the game he destroys a powerful artifact in Sauron's presence. This story is a part of the Black Book of Mordor, and it directly challenges the idea that Gandalf only came to Middle-earth in the Third Age. I think transgressions can be forgiven if the game calls for it. However, I think creators should be mindful of the material they are adapting. Things can change if they need to, but be very sure you have a good reason why and provide a well-made alternative. This can keep the game from not feeling like Middle-earth anymore. I think we have seen with a game like Guardians of Middle-earth what happens if you go too far from the original works. So here it is, a faithful adaptation with its own story to tell. The Lord of the Rings Online, a quiet force rolling along in the background. Middle-earth come to life, there for those who wish to see it. Thanks for watching this video. This is a bit different from the content I usually make, and I don't think I will be making another one of these long-form videos anytime soon. But if this video has made you interested in the content on my channel, feel free to stick around, as I am planning on making more of those detailed videos for the coming time. For this video I have invested in a better microphone, and I hope the increase in audio quality was noticeable, as I had to re-record this voiceover 2 times due to selecting the wrong microphone in Adobe Premiere. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Go give the retrospective a watch if you haven't already. It takes some time, but it is truly worth it. Anyway, I will see you next time.